Hello, welcome back to Tarot 101. Today we will be talking about the number 12 card, the Hanged Man or Hanging Man. But we'll be talking about the card, but we'll also be talking a bit about reversals. As you can see, he is upside down in the tree. So we will be talking a little bit about reversals, and there you can read reversals as a reader if you'd like. You don't have to. I choose to read reversals dependent upon the deck. I'll use the Muka Tarot as an example. That is a heavily decorated back of the card. This is my Rider Waite, so it looks exactly the same upside down as it does right side up. This one, not so much. For me particularly, reversals depend upon the deck. That's the Gilded Tarot. Um, if if you choose not to do reversals, that's up to you. But first, we're going to talk about the Hanging Man. He is not, and again, he's a major arcana, so most of the time it is illustrated as a blind man for whatever reason. But as we've talked about in the past, tarot is not gendered. That's the Muka Tarot. This is just an energy. It is about fresh perspectives. It is about, uh, I like to think of it as getting more information. You'll notice if you've ever been to a party where there was somebody at the back of the party that just kind of hung out and watched. That's this energy. You're getting information. You're getting more information. The origin of this is actually in Norse mythology. Odin, or some of you may, younger people may not be familiar with that. Anthony Hopkins from the Thor's movies, he plays Odin, Thor's dad. And you'll notice he only had one eye throughout the whole series. He, in Norse mythology, hung himself upside down from the Tree of Wisdom and blinded himself to take more information in. That is the fresh perspective. There is a sense of calm with the character within this card. He is, and again, that's just how this is illustrated. Means nothing gender wise. Traditionally, is a man, for whatever reason, because it does tend to be, which always interested in me because it is a more passive energy. It would make more sense as a female, but I digress. Depends on the card deck. Um, he is getting more information. He is looking at things in a very literal new way. He is looking at things upside down. Um, but he's never in distress. If you look at his facial expression, he's almost defiant in this one. But he's very peaceful. He is just watching. He is simply watching. He is in no distress at all. He's not hanging by his neck. It's not a violent card. He's often only hung up by usually just the left leg. The left side of the human body does refer to using your intuitive brain. So he is gathering information that perhaps the rest of his senses have ignored or not been able to see. It is that fresh perspective. Let me back out of this situation. A lot of Four of Swords energy out of this card too. Sometimes if you've ever been told to sleep on a situation, you've got a big decision, sleep on it, let your brain process it. Same energy. And that minor arcana pair would be the Four of Swords. It's that, let me sleep on that, let me process it a little bit, let me get some more information, and I'll get back with you with that information tomorrow. Things always look better in the morning. It's that kind of energy. It is contemplative, and again, the fact that it is all traditionally drawn as a male does indicate to me that it is tapping into that more masculine side. Doesn't necessarily mean that, and that never made a bunch of sense to me, but here we are. But he's very passive. He is using his intuition. Although, yeah, I mean, it depends on the leg. It depends on how it's illustrated. Traditionally, it's the left leg, but I guess it doesn't quite matter. He is getting more information, be it input, be it just looking at things differently. Let me get someone else's perspective. It's that energy. He's looking for new ways to look at things. Opportunities may arise from that perspective. He's also up in a tree, so he has taken the high ground. He is essentially up from the situation, so he is able to see the fuller picture. If you've ever been at a sporting event, the people who sit on the floor, you pay the most for those. You know, if you've ever been to like an NBA game or a basketball game, the floor seats, yes, you're closer to the action, but the best seats may be a little bit further up, since the people who really enjoy the sport tend to back up, simply because they can see more of the court. And that's this energy as well. So he is up, like if the situation is down here, I'll put him back in frame. He can see more of the situation down here from his vantage point, which is a point that almost gets overlooked sometimes. There are, it's a bigger perspective. It's a new perspective. So you can see problems before they approach. That's this energy. It's getting more information, fresh perspectives. Enough about that. We've talked, what are we up to now? 7 or 8 minutes about the Hanged Man. Let's talk about reversals, because, it'll just be a quick little blurb. He is actually drawn in, he's not in the reverse, but he's drawn hanging upside down. So we're going to segue into that. Last week I was talking about oracle cards for a few moments, but reversals are not necessarily mandatory. If you choose not to read them, don't read them. That is completely you. If that's not your style, that is not your style. It's people ask if the card means one thing, having it in reverse means it's the opposite of that. If you have say the Hanged Man, where he's about a fresh perspective, is it about, and you find him in reverse in a reading, is it about keeping the same old stubborn thinking? And the answer to that is yes and no. For the Hanged Man in particular, it is doing things the same way for the same purposes over and over and over again, simply out of stubbornness, a refusal to change. But the longer answer, at least in my experience, is that reversals, dependent upon the card, can change the meaning to varying degrees. The sun will always be the sun. It may indicate a delay in that joy and abundance that the sun brings, but it doesn't mean it's not coming. And it really depends on how those cards are aspected. It depends on how you interpret them, and a lot of this is not only a matter of knowing what each card means. It's using a good bit of your intuition. It is also, I like to think of it as interpretation of, say, poetry or prose. A line of poetry could mean a million different things, dependent upon the reader. And we'll take the sun as an example. You may look at this and say, well, the sun is out, there's this big red sash, well, maybe something's coming, like you're waving a red flag in front of a bull. Okay, and if that's your experience, if that's the situation that occurs every time you see the sun in a reading, well, that's your interpretation. You've made that notation stick in your brain. Same thing with reversals. If every time you see the sun in reverse, things go Mercury retrograde, left for you, that may be your interpretation. For most readers, reversals don't necessarily mean the exact 100% opposite of the upright meaning of the card. Uh, Sometimes it is simply a different take on it. It's a balancing act. Sometimes things are just poorly aspected. If you see a good card and it's in the past or it's poorly aspected, it's in that kind of hopes and fears position, uh, it might just be things to be mindful of. It doesn't necessarily mean the exact opposite. Sometimes it can just be the upright meaning to a lesser extent. The opposite of the Empress does not mean infertility and lack. It just means maybe you're not using your intuition to its best facility. But that's just my interpretation. And there's a lot of interpretive material that we use when it comes to these type of situations. I'll leave it there. Thank you for stopping by. Tune in to your monthly tarot for your sun, moon, and ascendant sign. Feel free to look around and see if this is a channel that you want to support. There's some little moments, little meditative moments that I've added just because they're fun. I'll see you next time. Bye, family.